are super excited to be here with everyone and echoing what Camilla was saying in that please, if there's a question, do not hold it to the end. Just throw it in the chat. We have people monitoring that, and we want to make this as useful and impactful to everyone on this call. So with that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Meredith Chandler. I'm currently head of sales at Aligned. Aligned is a digital sales room that makes it very easy for buyers and sellers to collaborate and make a buying process a lot easier for anyone in cycle. And I am accompanied by the lovely Rebecca this morning.
Thanks, Meredith. My name is Rebecca Elgin. I am a Global Vice President of Sales Ops Enablement and Training, and thrilled to be here today, especially with this topic. I've had this topic all week since we just went into the new quarter with my sales leaders, so it could not be more relevant.
Amazing. Well, with that, we will get right into it. If anyone has a sales team or sales org that missed last quarter or last year, the good and the bad news is you are not alone. According to Pavilion here, about 78% of sales teams missed quota in 2024. The majority of sellers and sales orgs did not hit those numbers. We're seeing a lot of emerging trends, such as reduction in win rate is going down around 18%. Sales cycles are elongating by about 16%. You've got a 21% reduction in deal value, so ACVs are dropping as well. And only about 17% of AEs drive 81% of all of the revenue. These are some pretty drastic stats here, but nothing that this group is not already aware of, right? We're just putting some numbers to what each and every one of you is probably already feeling. We want to get to the bottom of why is this happening, right? Well, the underlying theme is that sales is more complex than ever. We've got the majority of sales going into indecision. So deals are getting lost to staying with the status quo. They're ghosting altogether. We run an incredible cycle with them. You put them through the process. You have all the information in your CRM. You're tracking it, you're forecasting it, and then poof, they vanish. Another reason is that there's more CXOs involved than ever before. So we've got 72% of deals now requiring a CXO. So you could do all of this work, run them through an entire cycle just to get a no at the finish line. There's 3 times the amount of stakeholders than in the past 10 years. So it's a lot harder to get that consensus to unify in selecting a vendor, selecting a path forward. You've just got too many voices in the room. And only 5% of the buying cycle is actually sent with your sellers. If you think about it, a lot of buyers these days are very tech savvy. If you think about commercial sales, you can now buy a Tesla from your iPhone. And so buyers are wanting to self-educate and don't necessarily want to go through all the hoopla with a sales rep. And then you've got sales reps who are just winging it. So there's no standardization or there's a lack of standardization. You have those top reps that we just discussed who are driving most of the revenue and not a standardized way to replicate it. So these are some of the biggest factors that we're seeing that contribute into this missed revenue. Want to open it up to the group though. Do any of these or even Rebecca in your world, are you seeing these more than others?
Oh, absolutely. In the deals that I'm involved with when I'm looking at tech, I have to get CXO sign off. And, we've gone to such integral and integrated teams now that it's not just, if I'm looking at a tool like Align, it's not just my North American team. It's, you got to be global, you got to act global, which means I'm involving a heck of a lot more people, which means a lot more opinions that we don't always want. And then, just last week, Meredith, I had a sales rep, shall remain nameless, and said that they were going to follow up with pricing. Well, they're definitely not going to get an October signature. I still don't have pricing. And that winging it before execution, it's dead. I have moved on. It's like a bad first date. I'm going on. I'm going to go find someone else.
How do they not just send you pricing? That's pretty inexcusable.
It's because 65% of sales reps are winging it.
What would happen? I guess you just said like they're like a bad date, they're dead to you. What if they came back today and said, here's the pricing and just pretended like a 7 day turnaround was standard for them? Would you even consider reviewing the pricing or would it really be dead to you?
It would really be dead to me because if they're going to do that in this stage, like the honeymoon stage, if you think about dating, it should be all like flowers and, the extra like phone calls. And we're now over a week. They said that they were going to have it to me by end of day Thursday of last week. So
Mm.
we're way, way past that. If I can't trust you in this part of the process, I'm not going to trust you later when I need help.
Yes, I feel very similarly. Also, more so if it's this difficult to get you to engage before you have my money, I can't imagine what it's going to be once you actually have my money and you don't really have a reason to reach out.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge is, and this is why this topic is something I'm so passionate about, because I started in sales. So I was a rep, and people forget things, and you get busy, and you get a lot of emails, and something falls through the cracks, which is such a detriment to the sales organization and hitting their quotas. And I get it, we all get a million emails a day, but we can't have that poor execution because that salesperson is going to reach out to me, I guarantee at some point, and I'm going to reply and share what I've just shared with you. And they're going to have that, crap moment. And it's not going to be good, especially at the end of the quarter.
At the end of the quarter. That's still a little fresh for me, even though we're 1 month into our Q4. We have reps who are forecasting certain deals and then they're working with their buying committee, but then at the last minute, either the deal will slip or we've sent proposals, we're waiting for signature, and we just never hear another word. And so I would say indecision is probably more prevalent in my world right now. And I think a lot of it is that we forget that buyers, it's not their full-time job to buy software, right? And it's just a drop in the bucket for them. And so we like to push them through our process, but there needs
Mm-hmm.
to be an extra emphasis on what is their buying process? Are they even aware internally of their buying process? Do they really know, who else needs to sign off on this? Do they have any buying power, any buying capital? Where do they stand in the org in terms of confidence of getting this approved, right? Not just from a buying process standpoint, but a solution standpoint. Nobody wants to be somebody who brings on a vendor that doesn't work. It's very scary. And so we're seeing a huge shoot up in just staying as is, even if as is isn't getting the job done for them because there's just an overall fear of change in general.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people buy for three basic reasons. You're going to save me time, you're going to save me money, or you're going to make me look good. I don't want to be that person that buys new software and then have my CEO come after me and be like, well, that was an utter failure. So there is a lot of trust. And I know we're going to get into other topics later about this, but that's where really understanding each other is so critical throughout the process. So you're not winging it and you're not having that poor execution.
Absolutely. Brandy says in the chat, definitely experienced, although our metrics don't match the sad stats and are better than ever, honestly. That's great, Brandy. We love to hear that. I realize our dramatic changes are due to such changes all around the same time. Pricing increase, trial pipeline stage process changes, and AE coaching and quick process change implementation. Yeah, that's a lot to navigate all at once. That could definitely impact your metrics. And I'm glad that you have really strong metrics. But yeah, change management, especially when there's a few all at the same time, it can be more difficult to measure what is correlative and what is causative, right? Like which came first, the chicken or the egg, and which is actually moving the needle in which direction. So I think we will get into that. Anything else from the chat or anyone feel one of these more strongly than the others that you'd like us to focus on? Great. We'll just move on ahead then. We find that no sale is complex, right? It's really the buying process. There's no product that is so overly complex that deters people from buying. It's really the process in general. And so, again, if you think about the new reality of B2B sales, we've got more CFOs involved than ever. So, we're seeing 79% of buyers now report a CFO needing to be involved, which wasn't always the case before. Sometimes you could work directly with your champion or maybe one or two levels above them, which means now you're handling different cycles, right? Maybe your reps are doing an evaluation, but then simultaneously talking numbers with that CFO. We've also got information paralysis, right? I feel like this every time I just go to a candy store or try to figure out what I want for dinner. So I can't imagine uh, suffering this with buying a new technology. So we find that 65% of buyers feel overwhelmed by just the plethora of information out there available, which is a great thing, right? We can all self-educate now. There's so many resources where we can get all of the info that we need, but it also makes things more difficult when it comes to actually making a decision. And then we're also seeing touch point overload. So more channels such as reviews, social, etc. And combined with remote work, it just increases the amount of buying steps needed to make the actual purchase. Rebecca, which of these resonate most in your world?
So, I mean, the biggest one is just the touch point overload. I mean, we're so inundated, and I would say especially in RevOps. RevOps teams tend to be super lean. So we're looking at all the tools. I get dozens of emails a day from companies wanting to sell me something and to go save my team's time and be more efficient. Well, I oversee sales ops for the globe. I have 2 people that report to me. So we're supporting hundreds of people and it's a lot to manage. So we're leaner and having to loop in more people for any particular buying process, as you showed earlier, it just makes the whole buying process much much more time consuming than any of us want it to be. I planned my wedding in 14 days because I like to get things done and have it be efficient. Then I can just enjoy it. Well, that's not the reality though, because there's so many more steps.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And then again, if that buying committee doesn't know the steps, it's very common that we think we're at the end of a cycle and then one or two additional steps sneak in there unknowingly at the end. Brandy is writing in the chat again, stakeholders and internal processes of the buyer that become surprises during the sales cycle. Yep, that weren't initially disclosed or even known by the stakeholders. Yeah, I think most of them don't know until push comes to shove, right? Example, oh, I was just told by risk management that I need to go to RFP or I need you to fill out these additional time-consuming forms, spreadsheets, part of the process. Yeah.
Or
Surprise,
procurement,
surprise.
everyone's favorite, procurement.
Yeah. So we're also seeing that when there's more buyers, and this kind of goes without saying, there's going to be more disagreements, right? So just think about if you're with your family trying to figure out what to eat for dinner or where to go for vacation, like that is a very enjoyable experience where there can be, not smooth group consensus, but we think about buying a new technology that's going to impact so many parts of the org, it becomes even more complex. And so what we're seeing here are some actual numbers that as the size of the buying group goes up, how much more difficult it is to achieve that consensus. So when you've got obviously one buyer, it's a lot easier to make your case when there's, one set of opinions in one process. But you can already see here that when we get to 5, it starts to drop pretty dramatically. And when it gets to 6, it becomes overwhelmingly more difficult. So forecasting shouldn't really rely on what reps will say happen, right? If I had $1 for every time I heard a rep say, I feel good about this deal, and we have to correct them and say, we don't want to forecast on feelings. We want to forecast on facts, right? What is actually happening in the deal? What is the mutual behavior here? What is the compelling reason? What is the urgency? What is the event that is taking place that is making them want to move now? And that's what we're all here to discuss, right? Forecasting and how to protect it and its accuracy. Well, again, that becomes really difficult when 95% of buying happens when we're not even in the room to control the sale. What causes the most slip deals for you all? Is it approvals? Is it overall ghosting? Or is there some sort of misalignment?
Here's what everyone says.
Yeah.
Ghosting.
Anyone else? Ghosting, approvals, ghosting again, ghosting. How timely for Halloween. Ghosting, approvals.
Well, and I would also say too, because look, the average human being, like, is not going to want to go, hey, Meredith, I just don't like your product. They're not going to want to do that or have to fess up of, I didn't know what the actual process was, and now I'm embarrassed. So rather than just tell you I didn't know what the process was, I'm probably going to ghost you just because I'm like, I'm feeling kind of silly. And so, in my opinion, ghosting is due to the stalled approvals, due to the misalignment, or just due to the fact of, you didn't wow me, but it's really everything wrapped into one. And that makes it even harder from a forecasting standpoint to figure out what could I have done differently today or for this deal that I'm not going to do for the next deal, because we don't actually know why they ghosted.
That's a very valid point. So we have closed lost reports that are gated. And so you have to leave specific reasons when you close lost something out, right? So was it a product missing feature? Were we missing a product feature, or was timing off, or are we misaligned in budget? But then there are 3 to 4 other options, which are never heard from the ghosting, no decision at all, stayed as is. And when I run this data at the end of the quarter, the end of the month, the ghosting and the undecisiveness is actually an overwhelming amount of our close loss reason. And it makes it very difficult as a sales leader, or even when I share it across the other leaders, like you said, Rebecca, to make improvements, right? Because if I have the data and I do this with the product features, I tally up the features, here's the associated revenue. If we could build this feature out, you product, tell me how much dev time this is going to take. Here's the associated ARR. Is the juice worth the squeeze? We can improve that. But if somebody straight up ghosts us and gives us zero feedback, we don't know, to your point, is that a process problem on our side, the sellers? Is there misalignment from the buyer on actual value, or is there something else? It's kind of the worst reason to get, because we're all data people on this call, right?
No, and so how I try to treat that ghosting or no decision is that prospect didn't like me enough or trust me enough to be honest.
Mm.
So going back to dating, it's why are we breaking up? And because otherwise, like, you can't improve. You can't do anything differently next time. And I try to be really conscious of it because I was a rep, so I've been in their shoes, and I try to remember to give them an actual reason. And sometimes I don't, because otherwise, they can't do better tomorrow. But to me, it boils down to just they didn't like me enough or trust me enough to want to be honest as to why they go and ghosted.
I'm sure it's not because they didn't like you enough, Rebecca. I think you nailed it with it's probably a big part of embarrassment, maybe. Oftentimes we get on these calls and the reps will ask, who else needs to be involved? And they will say, oh, it's just me. Someone will take the recommendation, and the reps will get happy ears. They don't pressure test that because, again, reps are told no 100 times a day. So if somebody says yes, they really cling on to that for dear life.
They're like
When
little puppies, but to a fault then.
Yes.
And it's something that you have to work through and not be afraid to ask the tough questions.
Yes. The tough questions will get you quicker to a no, which I always tell my reps. A no just stands for next opportunity. I'd rather know now if we're not a good fit so that I can put that time into somebody who would be. And so there's a few reasons, real reasons why deals slipped, and we talked about them just now. Decision overwhelm. So too many stakeholders. We saw on that graph what happens once more people enter the room. Buyers being out of the loop in general. So decisions can happen async when we're not in that physical buying room. We don't know what happens when people go sync internally, right? We not only do we not know the outcome sometimes, but we don't even know what happened in that room. What was that discussion? Was it a hung jury? Were there 8 jurors in favor of, and then one who really tipped it over to a hung jury? So we never know. And then there's often process misalignment. So sales stages don't always equate to your buying stages. I'm sure, Rebecca, you see this a lot in the ops world. How do you feel about process misalignment?
Oh, it happens every day. And, because the biggest challenge is I love Salesforce. I'm also a Salesforce administrator by training, but it has some gaps in that, we have our opportunity stages that are very cookie cutter and they're very task focused. I would love to just one day rename all my sales stages to be like they agreed to a meeting, but then they ignored me for a while and like go back 2 squares because it's not cookie cutter, but no rep wants to take a deal from like qualified to, oh snap, I found out there's 6 more decision makers that I have to go and win over. They don't want to move those backwards. But it's basically like a board game. It's like, sorry guys, go back 2 spaces. And it makes it a challenge because we're told that things have to go from A to B to C to D, from our CRM standpoint, whatever. That's not how life works. So then we can't, like our sales organizations can't wrap their head around the fact of, okay, I just went backwards. Is that okay? What does that look like? Your CRM can't account for every scenario.
Yeah, we assume buying is so linear, right? And that's us again kind of forcing them into our buying process of, step one, step two, step three, pass go, collect $200. But really, if we broke it down, and I love your stages of clients said they wanted us, but then they changed their mind and now they have to go find 2 more people, like it would probably look like some sort of ping pong Tetris graph. And so
That
RevOps.
is my ideal scenario of just a flow chart. So maybe someone from Salesforce is on this call and they can fix it. Let's give them the choose your own adventure scenario. Kamala, I love this question because my sales organization is deathly afraid of marking something as lost. They're petrified of it. They would rather leave it open, but like mark it as like 10% probability and push it out a year just so no one sees it. And it goes back to the forecasting. They don't want to agree or say it's going to happen until it actually happens because of that. You don't know if they're going to ghost. You don't know if they're going to have that misalignment or they're just going to do nothing.
I think it goes back to kind of the happy years. Sales reps in general are typically pretty competitive. And so a lot of their success metrics are very visible throughout the entire org. They're just measured on KPIs. How many dials did you make? How many connects? How many conversions? How many new logos? What's your average ACV compared to Rebecca's ACV? And so I think close loss just plays into that as well. And nobody, especially a competitive person, doesn't want to lose anything. And so, yes, we stress the importance of accuracy because that's how we do our forecasting is based on the individual's close rate. And so we educate them on accuracy because it's how they make their QBRs and their number-based plans at the top of the quarter. And I've actually had this happen before. We had a rep, this was a few companies ago, and he was doing his plan to goal based on the team close rate, which was 18% at the time. But this was a very green, newer rep, and his close rate was actually 11%. And so I had to call out to him. I said, like, hey, great math here. I see that you took the average, but your close rate is actually 11%. And it's great that we know that now because now we can see the gap and we can actually put together a pipeline plan with 3 months left in the quarter where we can close it proactively instead of reworking this plan with 3 weeks left, scrambling and realizing, oh, shoot, we're going to miss the number. So that's why the accuracy is so important, regardless of saving face.
No, agreed. Every deal is different. If we treat everyone the same as a cookie cutter, then it's always going to be the case that 85% of the sales or whatever that stat was, Meredith, is always going to be made up from a very, very small number of the team. Because you're always going to have people that are going to be your A players. You could give them a stick and a notepad and they're going to figure out how to make it work. But there's all the other people that have the potential, but we can't treat them like those A players. We have to figure out what are their strengths, their weaknesses, and how to level them up. So I always have all of my reporting on the individual level. Outside of when I report up to my executive team, I don't do team reporting because it doesn't matter. It infuriates me when I get told, "Oh yeah, this team made quota." I'm like, "No, 2 of your 10 reps made quota. Let's not forget about the other 8 that didn't."
That's such a really good point, actually, in the individual metrics, because you're right. No sales rep, unless you're cloning them, maybe in the near future with AI or bots,
Yeah.
but no two of them today are alike. And you're right, they have different strengths and different areas of improvement. And for example, when we do this math at the top of the quarter, we have some reps who have a really high close ratio. And so if they have a gap, we focus on things like increasing their ACV, right? Or selling multi-product because they've already got that closing motion down, and that's going to fill their gap versus other reps we work on. Okay, you actually need more reps because your close rate is smaller, and so we need to get more opportunities. So, good reminder that the metric should also be individualized.
And with that as well, there's a great comment in the chat about just how do you re-engage close loss opportunities. So Meredith, I know you said like a no just means no opportunity, move on and all of that. I always treat close loss as a not now. And because that tends to be what happens. This time of year, I might be shopping around for budget reasons. I'm not going to go and implement it in Q4. My sales team will murder me. They're just focused on closing the year out strong. I'm going to shop around now and look for something to roll out at sales kickoff earlier in the year. So Raul, I always go back after the close loss opportunities. I have an automatic report that goes out to every sales rep about 6 months after something is lost of just go reach back out. If they tell you no again, try to sell them something else and just see what happens.
I think that's a great point, and I would agree. I think a 6-month mark is a good indicator. When we close lost, we actually put them on a nurture campaign. So when I say next opportunity, I kind of just mean like in that moment, but it's never really a fully closed door. They're still getting marketing drips every week or every few weeks or invitations to webinars. We're still trying to be top of mind or at least be visible to them. But what we found that has worked, and if your rep has done a strong job qualifying the opportunity or quantifying it at the beginning, coming back into that original evaluator and mentioning those, like, hey, 6 months ago we talked because this process was causing your team XYZ of lost time or revenue. I've seen that your team has grown since then, so I can only imagine the pain is 2 times and you quantify it, right? That's 30, 40, $50,000 since we last spoke is now a better time. We also will try to go to a different person in the account. So while we are reaching out to that original evaluator, if their team has grown or even not, there might be some organizational changes. Maybe there's a fresh perspective in there. Even if they don't end up being evaluator, we might get some nuggets of information from them of, oh yeah, actually now's a much better time. We were able to finish this initiative, so there's more bandwidth for this evaluation.
100%. And it goes back into why deals slip to begin with, because if, more often than not, they're only talking to one person. I mean, because, in RevOps, I'm not the end user for the tools that I buy 9 times out of 10. It's my sales reps, it's my sales leaders, it's my customer success team. And so, the fatal flaw is they're only talking to me. They're not reaching out to the other stakeholders in it. And I get busy and I ghost them. Sorry. And then they mark it as lost and then they forget. But if you're not talking to the other people, because if I go have all of my sales leaders blowing me up about why I was talking to Aligned and then, ghosted poor Chris, then if I have all of them bugging me, well, I'm going to go call Chris because I don't want them bugging me. But it's a fatal flaw. You got to be talking to more than one person because there's always going to be more than one person in the sales process. And it's also a case of talk to the people that are adjacent to it. I also oversee sales training and enablement. There's no tool that I would launch without their involvement because it is their job to help launch it and for it to be successful. If they're not a part of the process, what are they going to do? When I'm like, hey guys, here's the new tool that we're launching, and they know nothing about it, they're going to be super mad at me. And they're not going to be as invested. If I get them along in the ride from the beginning, or the sales rep is getting my team along for the ride in the very beginning, it's going to make it an easier sell.
There's a question here for you, Rebecca, from Brandy saying, how do you apply individual metrics and compensation in the same across the board for reps, especially from a global perspective?
I think it's when compensation is the same. How can
Oh,
you apply?
Just let me know and
how can you apply individual metrics when compensation is the same across the board for reps, especially from a global perspective?
So, we have basically the same comp plan across the board. And this really goes back to the coaching and quotas. So I'm not going to go give a brand new rep the same quota that I'm going to go give a rep that's been here for 20 years. And it's really looking at those individual plans of what's going to work for this particular territory or this particular industry if you're vertical driven. And because, for my universe, trying to sell into casinos, a lot of red tape. You have to have all these different things. There's a lot going on. It's regulated. Same with hospitals. They're regulated. And so it requires a lot of different steps, which means I'm going to go look at that person that's selling into regulated industries. They're going to have different metrics. They're going to have longer sales cycles and incentivize them on that. Even if the comp plan is the same across the board, spiffs. Everyone loves a random $500 if they hit their metrics to get them from being a C player to a B player to A player. Incentivize the hard work. Spiffs tend to be pretty easy to come by. I've always experienced that, whoever's the overseer of the dollars, spiffs tend to fall under the radar because it's $500 here, $250 here. So
True.
it's it's like when you go get your Starbucks in the morning, $5 here. You don't think about it. It's only when you look at like your annual credit card statement and be like, oh my God, I spent a lot of money on Starbucks. Incentivize them that way, because that's also going to give you they're going to feel that you're so invested in them because you're looking at the metrics that are right for them, not right across the team.
Yes, we do quarterly spiffs actually, and it changes based on the strategy that we have that quarter. The new spiff that I've implemented, because again, sales reps are competitive by nature, is a team spiff as well. And so, for example, this quarter, we're really focused on our outbound engine. So we have a self-source spiff where there's an individual component, but then if everybody on the team hits a collective metric, and so everybody has to hit that barrier to entry, then everyone on the team gets an additional spiff. So not only do they get to be competitive on their own, but they still have to collaborate and help everyone towards the common goal. Versus last quarter, the spiff was on higher ACV deals because that's what the strategy of the org was. So I would double tap on you, Rebecca, because spiffs are a great way to implement change within your org and incentivize change really quickly.
Don't apply individual metrics, but it's a heavy lift, completely understand. And for products and services though, and that's where I love Meredith's idea about just the team, because the team spiffs can also be very individualized as well. I know that sounds weird, but if you're looking at your global teams or team selling, how can I best incentivize my rep in North America to partner with my rep in France and figure out what those metrics are to grow those particular accounts? And Melissa, always happy if you ping me, we can have a coffee chat, a wine chat, and we can hash it out, because it is a challenge when you're looking at global comp and how to incentivize them. Because the better incentivized that they are and they feel supported, they're going to be much more amenable to the coaching to minimize when you have decisions, decision overwhelm or just being ghosted. They're going to be much more on it.
Absolutely. So the reality is, like we talked about before, and I really liked Rebecca's ideal CRM where it's not linear, right? It goes up and down because that's the reality of it. And it's kind of wild that the CRM shows it. It's almost deceptively so linear, right? If you think about your HubSpot or your Salesforce, the deals progress this way, but like you said, the deals can go any which way at any given time and still wind up at a buying consensus. We're seeing that buyers really live in loops. So you've got decision overwhelm, you've got 60 email threads, depending on which part of the cycle you're in, right? A proposal stage might have your financial team involved versus the evaluation team is the end users, etc. We are not necessarily equipping champions with what they need to sell internally. We might be sending them a slide deck, but they need a business case. They need something with ROI or COI or CAC, and our sellers aren't equipping them with that or expecting them to do that on their own, on top of their own job. The process isn't clear, like we mentioned before. There's just an overall chaotic experience. And so we find that your CRM is really great at tracking meetings, but not necessarily buyer intent, right? And so unfortunately, RevOps can't really fix forecasting until we start tracking what buyers actually do between those meetings. So how do we get from the start of the cycle to the end? What happens in all of that loop-de-loop? So one of our big aids in keeping things on track is a mutual action plan. Curious if anyone can just drop it in the chat. Is your team regularly and consistently using maps? Or have you tried using maps and have they flopped? Or is your team stellar at using maps? What's the map
I'll
usage?
speak for my sales team. It's, so we have a very tenured sales organization. And so in their minds, they've all been in sales 20, 30 years, 40 years for some. They think that they're doing this, but they're flying by the seat of their pants, and then they're missing things. And it's breaking that culture down of it is okay to have a list and say, hey, Mr. Client, so this is what we talked about. This is what we agreed to next time. Because like my story from earlier, I'm going to have a sales rep reach out to me sometime maybe over the next week and give me the pricing that they promised me a week ago. And I'm going to be like, I've moved on. We've broken up. I'm going to go see other people. And this is why deals slip. We forget the basics, especially in Q4. It is the shortest quarter out of all of them when you bake in all the holidays, especially for a lot of companies that might be off, between Christmas and New Year's and different things like that. It is the shortest season. We're all twice as busy. We have the holiday parties, we have all the things. And we get so busy and we get distracted and we forget the basics. And that's why I love mutual action plans and the fact of just let's commit, let's agree upon something. Because also, if I have a dedicated meeting with someone trying to sell me something, I would feel horrible if I didn't show up. So just out of guilt and not wanting to like upset people, I'm going to show up to that meeting.
Yes, that. And I think RevOps and Rev leaders in general, we're very organized people and we like seeing what the next steps are, what I can expect later, what you need from me and what I need from you to keep things moving forward. And so I think to your point, because it doesn't sound like we have a ton of Maps users in the audience just from the chat, but we always encourage a mutual action plan. And I think the key word there is mutual. So I think a lot of companies and sellers forget that part. And again, they just try to put their buyers into their selling process. And so at Aligned, we really preach the mutual aspect of asking them, what do you typically do from here? I have a recommendation for next steps. Usually at this point, we loop in so and so, or we loop in finance, or we want to build a proposal. But what do you think? And then get their feedback. And also, it makes it easier for them, Rebecca, like you mentioned earlier, to just say, like, I actually don't know, like, what usually happens at this point. And so then your sellers can really guide them, put on their expert hat on and say, again, usually at this stage, this is what we do. And so Aligned, if anyone who isn't using a Maps, Aligned offers a really stellar map experience. You can assign dates, you can assign specific individuals, you can assign specific teams, and then one of the great parts about it is as these milestones come up, the system will remind you of what's upcoming so that your seller doesn't have to feel like they're constantly poking the bear. The system can just automatically say, we were supposed to review the pricing proposal today. Where are we on that? And so anyone on this call can try Aligned absolutely free and let your reps have some creativity with the maps. Rebecca, I think you're on the receiving end of a map. How has it impacted your sales cycle as a
So,
buyer?
so it's been great. And honestly, I don't know if Chris is on the call, but he's been fantastic. And because everyone is really busy. You know, I said this earlier, I find most RevOps teams are super, super lean. We wear 7 different hats on a daily basis. And so there's just a lot going on. And what I love about the aligned maps process, and I've seen the front end and the back end because we are exploring the tool. I'm working on that, is it really puts the ownership and it puts it clear. And it gives me the visibility of kind of, okay, what are the steps? What's the timeline? What's not reasonable? Like what needs to shift because of XYZ? But then it also ensures that the salesperson is not forcing me on their timeline. It is one of my biggest pet peeves as a buyer when I get told on October 29th that they really want a signature by October 31st. And I'm like, well, we should have talked about that 6 weeks ago because I'm not on your timeline. My date here, I understand you want it in to look good for the end of month and different things like that. But the visualization really helps. And then it's also keeps accountability across the board of there's multiple stakeholders. If I saw my name tied to every single one of those, Meredith, as a sales leader, that should be your first red flag. And why are you only talking to Rebecca? There should be other people involved in this because at some point, other people are going to be involved, or you're going to get ghosted because I'm not the only buyer in this. And it's like I said, the biggest reason why deals slip, especially in Q4, people forget and they get busy. And we have twice as many things going on. There's more holidays, there's more days off. That means we have to be that much more on top of our game to not lose the deals. And so we have to be better. And there's no shame in writing a to-do list. I have a to-do list. I have a work one. I have a personal one every day. Why wouldn't we do the same things for our customers or our potential customers? What I really love is one of our biggest challenges internally is our sales involve a lot of other people internally. And so it's not just a mutual action plan between me and the prospect. It's a mutual action plan of my systems engineers and my installers and my creative team. And so what I love about Aligned on the back end is I can hold my internal people accountable to those dates too. Because not only do we have 10 times more people involved in a sale between a prospect and a company, we got 10 times more people on the back end too. Sales are more complicated. There's legal, there's RFPs, someone mentioned procurement. There's all these other steps involved that we got to make sure we go get all that done.
Absolutely. And as we pointed out at the top of the call, when more people join the cycle, it's harder to get consensus. And so something like a MAPS, like you said, not only helps the buyer, but the buying committee as a whole and all of the internal championing that you need to do as well. Tactic number one for helping protect the forecast is utilizing a mutual action plan. Again, anyone can try that out on Aligned for free. And our number two tactic to help fight forecasting slippage is buyer enablement content. So I think over the years, there's been a strong increase in seller enablement, right? How do we teach sellers what to say? How do we teach sellers what to show? There's full-on enablement teams within organizations, but how do we actually make it easier for the buyer to buy? And so it goes back to showing them what's relevant in their particular stage. So don't send them a PowerPoint or a deck when they need an ROI calculator or they need a COI calculator, or, don't arm your champion with a meeting recap when they say they're going up to the C-suite, right? We need to give them an executive summary. We need to give them a bulletproof business case when they're talking to those CFOs who are now involved in 80% of the deals, right? And so just meeting our buyer where they're at, and Align can also help with that too. We have an AI functionality, which will take everything from your call recordings, everything that's been put in your digital sales room, and it will spin this up automatically for you. Whether or not you're on Aligned, we highly encourage business cases, executive summaries. But if your reps want that extra support, you can always utilize the system to create this content to empower your buyers. Curious
And this
if
is something that's hugely overlooked, Meredith. I dread when I get just a generic PowerPoint deck about how sexy your product is. Because at the end of the day, if I'm going to my executive team, I'm going to go to them and say, I want this tool because it's either going to save me time, save me money, or it's going to make me look like a hero. And it's typically a combo of all three. That business case should address that. I know your tool is sexy. My CEO doesn't know and doesn't care.
does not care.
Is it going to save my sales organization time? Yes. And here's actually how I got into sales ops. I was a rep and I was really obnoxious to my boss. And we were a startup, and I would write him directions on how to make my life easier and make it so I didn't have to do as many steps to log calls and emails in Salesforce. And this was a long time ago. So I would write him, like I would research it over the weekend, and he would wake up on Monday mornings and I'd be like, hey, Brian, here's the steps I need you to do because this is going to take my number of clicks down from 9 to 2. I have other things to do. I got sales to make. That's what the executive team or whoever your buyers are want to see. Save me time, money, and make me look good. And, so the generic decks, great. You've already won me over. I'm talking to you. Go the extra mile. Use AI, guys. Like, really, I use AI all the time to kind of throw it together. Here's my top bullet points of here's what makes my life miserable. Here's what problem I'm trying to solve. What can my tool do for me? It's going to go a long way because those are the questions I'm going to get asked. If I'm going to have to go head to head with the CEO, the CRO, just get ahead of it.
That was a great pro tip for finding new people for your RevOps team. I have done that myself. There's a great question about the dividing line and responsibilities between sales and RevOps for forecast accuracy, but I want to make sure we get to the content with only 4 minutes left. So I will disappear again. Thank you.
Yes, I think on that note, maybe we could go through one more tip and then we'll answer that question and any other questions and we'll wrap because we're right here at the end. Number 3 deal is leveraging any sort of deal analytics. So when we think about that linear stage to close, which really looks more like this, it's because we don't know what's happening between each stage, right? If I send Rebecca a proposal, is Rebecca sending it forward to that CFO, to that CEO, like she said she did, or is it just sitting in her inbox still? And so we try to highlight buyer signals and buyer analytics whenever we can. So going back to forecasting on facts, not feelings. So is there mutual action plan progress? Are people looking at your proposals? Are people regularly checking out your content or logging into your calls and being very engaged? Are there new stakeholders being uncovered at every step? Are people bringing more people into the deals? And so again, because 95% of buying happens when we're not in the room, we need to make sure that we have visibility into that room. And so Aligned again can help you uncover all of this and more. And so I think with that, we can open it up to Raul's question, which I think is geared for you, Rebecca, and any other questions from the group.
Great. So Raul, in my experience, you get sales orgs that are on one of two extremes. They're like, I'm going to close every deal in my pipeline by the end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year, whatever your kind of time frame is. And then you have the group that's like, nope, it's going to stay at 10% so I can walk in and be a hero at the 11th hour. And there's some great tools out there. Cluster is one. They're fantastic for forecasting, and Salesforce is expanding theirs as well. But I think where RevOps really comes into play is they eliminate the BS meter of whichever camp your teams are in, because they're always on one extreme or the other. RevOps is just the level-headed, rational one of the group. And so it's, saying, okay, my team projects that they're going to close 80% of the pipeline. Well, historically, they typically only close 42%. Then that's where we just have to be the, that leveling voice of reason. Ultimately, it is sales' job and function to grow and win the pipeline. It is RevOps' function to layer in a logical level of just rationale to it. And sales doesn't like that because we're going to tell them they're not going to close as much as they say. And that's okay. But that's where we really come in. And it's getting them to understand the data too. Why are we not meeting over here in this camp, but we're doing this? Because then that goes back to the coaching.
Great question. I think we might have time for one more.
Proactive, huge. Get into the quarter ahead of time. If my sales organization, I've been scolding my sales team, I'm like, there's no pipeline for Q1, guys. Go and figure it out.
Well, I'm afraid this is all the time we have. I did drop links to follow folks, but make sure to go to Aligned if you have any questions specifically for Meredith, or find Rebecca on LinkedIn. I want to thank everybody for attending. Please do take the survey on the way out. I'm going to catch you at the next webinar. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to Meredith and Rebecca for sharing.
Thanks, everyone.